Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Moorey studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new Team Therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome to all our listeners around the world and in the United States, across the country, and in the universe. Welcome to episode 271. Today, we have the honor of having Peter Spurrier as our guest. And Peter has, by his own creativity and motivation, created and expanded Team Therapy in the United Kingdom. And we're here to find out what he's done and to introduce to the world Team UK. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Rhonda. Yeah, good morning, David. Good morning, Rhonda. It's evening here.
Hi, Peter. Good to see you. It's like we haven't spoken for about a minute. We've been very excited about having you on the podcast and connecting with you again and finding out all the fantastic things you've been up to.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, really, it's such an honor, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, Peter, before we do our dive in with you, I was going to read a podcast endorsement that we got from Sophia about our episode 268, which was the first part of Carly Zankman's personal work with David and Jill Levitt about how she wants to be a mother. And that was published on November 15th. And here's what Sophia wrote to David. I have lost 2 pregnancies in the last 2 years, and I still don't have a living child, and I might never have. Listening to the podcast and reading the Feeling Good book helped me overcome the intense feelings of guilt I had after my losses. Dr. Burns, your work and that you make it so easily accessible for everyone around the world has made a huge difference in my life. Thank you, Dr. Zankman, for opening up about your experience and giving other women the feeling that they have a friend out there who understands them. Sophia.
Well, thank you, Sophia, for that beautiful note. And I forwarded it to Carly, and she was very appreciative as well. And I hope you also enjoyed part 2 as well as there's some footnotes to part 2 at the end about some of the great things that have transpired since the time of that podcast. So feel free to email us again if you have more thoughts and reflections.
So, Peter, tell us, how did you get introduced to the Team Therapy in the first place? Tell us, are you a therapist? Are you a psychiatrist? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, I'm currently an independent CBT practitioner on the south coast of England in the UK, and I used to be a general medical practitioner, or I think you call it family practitioner, in previous life. So I got into CBT. There was a kind of dissatisfaction with general practice towards the end of my career. And it was, one of the things that was really getting to me was this quick fix approach to many things, but especially anxiety and depression. That, you got this kind of 10 minutes with the patient and you were giving medication. And there was some CBT available, but it was difficult to access and fairly rationed and limited. For me, I just thought every time it's a missed opportunity. The way the NHS works in England, it's understandable that they're not able to provide everything. But I felt uncomfortable increasingly, and I just wanted to do something else rather than wish the rest of my career away at the age of 55. So I learned about CBT first. It just seemed a good way to spend longer with patients and, learn about how to help them cope rather than fix them. So I was learning about CBT, and that helped me a lot to learn how to listen better. Like when a patient says they feel completely useless, that I don't just see it as a sort of exaggeration for the sake of emphasis or something, that they really mean that. And to imagine, how they might be feeling. I wasn't doing that. So CBT taught me that. But the way CBT was certainly in the UK was, it was kind of stilted. The outcomes were not particularly great and just not so enjoyable. And then I attended this workshop in London, in Wandsworth Town Hall. And it was by this guy, I think his name was David Burns.
Were you at that workshop?
I was, yes.
Oh, I got terribly slammed in that workshop.
Did you? You got some bad feedback, or?
Well, yeah, I felt like it was kind of a failure, really. But anyway, tell us more. This is
yeah. So it was called Scared Stiff. It was a 2-day workshop on anxiety, I was taken by it. But at that time, I was a busy GP. I was still learning CBT, but I was impressed enough to buy the toolkit. And it was this big white folder at that time that you took possession of. And that big white folder just sat on my bookshelf looking at me. And, it wasn't really until a couple of years later, 2 or 3 years later, when I went kind of full-time with CBT and coaching, that I pulled it off the shelf and started to look at it and work with it.
Hmm. And then did you get other training in team therapy?
Yeah. So the podcasts have certainly helped at that time. I was like a year and a half behind the start of them, but I caught up. So I learned that way. Mm-hmm. And just learning by using the toolkit, like starting
learning
off
by
with
practicing.
Testing. By practicing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I interrupted you. You said you started with testing.
Yeah, so testing was something I really didn't want to do. As a GP, they had these tests which they encouraged you to do when you saw a depressed or anxious patient. And it just felt like a bureaucratic sort of interference, really. And I didn't quite get this. Actually, they were quite good questionnaires, not as good as David's. But as a GP, I didn't quite get that I was actually getting great data and that my intuition was wrong. I thought it was the other way around. My intuition was right, and this was bad data. Mm. So I didn't want to do testing, but I did. And I have to say, having started with that, I just thought, yeah, he's got it. Certainly with respect to testing, definitely. And then moved on through the various stages.
I'm so excited to hear that you're an MD. I either didn't know that or hadn't remembered that, but I had a bit of the same, background myself, being an MD and being unhappy with, pushing antidepressants and not really seeing what I wanted to see in my patients. And I'm so filled with admiration at the change that you made and kind of leaping in a whole new and different direction. Takes a lot of courage, and I think in your case has brought you a lot of reward as well.
Definitely a lot of reward, because I've learned huge amount since then. Taking up the various steps of team, learning about how to do therapy, but learning about myself, which seemed to go hand in hand.
Mm. And then did you come to the United States and take the 4-day intensive with David?
Yeah. So my sort of anchor point were the podcasts. But then, this 4-day intensive in San Francisco. And, for the first time, I felt this really lovely, warm, accepting atmosphere, encouragement. And you were there, Rhonda.
I was.
I just remember you reaching out to me as somebody who was sort of coming from abroad and making me feel welcome, which I was very grateful for. And also Angela Crum, I just noticed, she's a woman of high integrity.
Oh God, she's wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was really nice to meet her as well, and to actually, be there in a proper workshop with David, and the difference between being there and sort of listening to podcasts or distance learning is quite something. It was just great to be there and actually work with real people and connect with people.
Was that the therapist that Jill and I treated who had some abuse from her previous therapist?
Yes, that was in 2019, right, Peter? That's when you were there?
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not sure there was the same person, but one of my enduring memories was I don't know the same person, but somebody who was very anxious to speak up in the workshop. I don't know whether it was the same person.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. We were walking around with her in the audience and bringing people up onto the stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you said, does anybody else, have sort of anxiety about speaking up in public? And sort of one or two people said, well, would you like to get up on the stage? And then you said, is there anybody else? And then there were about 5 people on the stage. And by the end of, a few minutes, there were about 25 people on the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
That was such a great experience. I remember that. And people became so vulnerable and the tears were flowing and they were opening up and people were experiencing joy. I see what you mean now, that being there and experiencing it is different from just hearing on a podcast. It's like experiencing something is believing. Seeing is believing. You can hear something and go in one ear and out the other. I guess you can even hear a live therapy session on a broadcast, but I guess experiencing it in person is pretty big. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe that would motivate me to try to get back to doing intensives when the viral situation permits, if ever.
Mm. Yeah, we hope so.
That would be great. It's just very difficult to describe the difference between podcasts and just being there.
Right, and seeing people in person.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, so then after you took that 4-day intensive in 2019, you went back to the UK with, all of this energy that you had gathered from the 4-day intensive and decided to create Team UK. Tell us about that.
Well, I definitely, my new mission in life, my new meaning in life was to spread the idea in the UK. And the only connection I could possibly think of was to wonder if Sterling Moorey was still practicing.
Did you look him up?
Yeah.
No kidding. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and he fondly remembered his days with you. And I think he mentioned Art Freeman as well.
Art was in Philadelphia and had worked with Ellis, and then he started working with Beck.
So he was one of the first British therapists to visit when CBT was in its infancy. And I'll quote him, he said, I had the good fortune to be trained and supervised by 2 major contributors to the field of cognitive therapy, David Burns. And he said, David is such a charismatic, enthusiastic, and very creative clinician, and I learned a lot from him. David is such an inspiring therapist and teacher. So I think you must have had a good impression on him, because then he went away and just went totally into CBT.
Yeah, he was tremendous even from the start as a medical student. The person since him, Matt May, was like that too, but is now still in our fold. In fact, we're going to do a podcast with him right after this one. But Sterling was so gentle and warm and intuitive, and he had that kind of a gentle British style, which was radically different from my own. But he was so effective, and he broke through with lots of patients that I was totally stuck with. But he was brilliant. He just had a beautiful way about him. And I'll never forget, we got to spend 2 full months together where he would just sit in with me, come over from England and sit in on every session for 2 full months. And we kind of worked as co-therapists. And I still miss him. I would still welcome the chance to do a co-therapy session with him. And I suppose it would be theoretically possible now that we have Zoom. Wow, it's just so cool that you looked him up.
Well, I emailed him today, and he sends his regards.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
He says he hopes to catch up with you sometime.
Yes, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I talk about him all the time, and will never forget what I learned from him.
Oh.
And I've talked about him, and I bet in 50 workshops at least, fondly describing fabulous interactions that we had together with patients we were working with.
That's great. And David, he actually attended one of our meetings in the UK in April, and was telling us about his view on empathy, particularly. He's written a book, and he let us have a chapter from his book, which was a really good chapter on empathy. And I think, although there may be a copyright borderline thing, he would even be happy to post that on the show notes so people could see that.
That would be fun.
Well, maybe we could get him on a podcast as a first step. What do you think, Rhonda?
I think that sounds like a positive idea for 2022.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So was his book on empathy, or was a chapter on empathy from a book on psychotherapy?
Yeah, so the particular chapter, I think the book is called The Therapeutic Relationship in Cognitive Behavioral Therapy.
Oh, yeah.
By Moorey and Lavender. And his particular chapter that I was referring to is on core conditions. Really good read. And he also wrote another book about CBT for, I think it's CBT for cancer. And that's his particular interest, CBT for people with, for palliative care and people struggling with insurmountable issues.
He got into that when we were working together, was when we first, and I think we even wrote a paper on something in the acceptance of suffering. And that's also been one of my favorite areas of clinical work, is working with people with serious medical problems, including physical pain as well as cancer and terminal cancer. And I've always found that population to be just, wonderful to work with. But that's Sterling Moorey. We'll get him on and let him speak for himself. And we want to hear more about Peter.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I just quote Sterling, just one sentence that he says about empathy before we move on?
Yeah.
He says, he tries to ask himself, if I was in this situation, would I feel the same? And if the answer is no, it's a sign I haven't fully understood the situation. If the answer is yes, it's the beginning of creation of a compassionate conceptualization.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's something like what Jill Levitt would say too.
Exactly.
Yeah. He was a gentle giant, I would say.
Yeah. So I asked him for his, sorry, Rhonda.
Go ahead.
Rattling on.
I mean, no apologies necessary. It's some of the things that you've said might not be familiar to American audience. So let me just clarify that when you say NHS, you're talking about the National Health Service.
Yes.
And that's like the national medical insurance for the people in London or all of the UK. Sorry.
Oh, it's funny you describe it as insurance, but yes, I suppose it is. It's a total population safety net. So everybody has access to treatment on the NHS for free. It's pretty good a lot of the time. Sometimes when there's large volumes of stuff, it can't be super quality and super quantity. So obviously it has to be limited to a degree, but it's a great system. Although I think politically there's some complaints about it being underfunded lately, but hopefully that will be corrected. So yes.
And when I was in the UK, you explained that when you saw patients, you really only had 10 minutes to speak to each of the patients. So if somebody came to you with anxiety or depression, there were sort of guidelines that you had to follow, which included prescribing medication. And that was part of the unhappiness with your practice, and you wanted to do more. And that's what brought you to Team CBT. So you went from having only 10 minutes with each patient when you were, an active general practitioner to having much longer sessions when you were, you said doing Team CBT with your patients. So when you came back to the UK, how did you build a practice, and how did you find other colleagues or train other colleagues to build what is there currently?
Well, I asked Sterling for his advice. He wasn't doing Team CBT as such himself, but he said, maybe write an article for a magazine, which I did. I wrote an article in something called CBT Today, which is the official magazine of the British Association for Behavioural and Cognitive Psychotherapists, the BABCP.
You give us the title of your article again?
I forget what the article was called now.
Or what's the journal called?
It's called CBT Today. It's not a journal as such. It's more of a relaxed, informal thing.
Sure.
The article was my experience of Team CBT. And Claire Vickers, who's one of our numbers, just written a more recent article, which we'll get in there too.
And the BACPT, that's the British
BABCP.
Sorry, that's the British Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Psychotherapists.
That's right. Well done, yeah.
The internet. And so after you wrote the article in CBT Today, did people reach out to you, or what happened next?
Nothing. Zero. I asked people to contact me. There was nothing. And then a couple of months later, I got contacted by somebody called Derek Riley from the middle of England, who just happened to go back and see this article. And he's done some fairly compelling personal outcome work, looking at the data on using Team CBT for pain, which is one of the harder ones to crack. But he's been successful. Anyway, he got back to me. So then there were two of us. So we were beginning. And then there was somebody called Greg Stewart, who's really enthusiastic guy from Scotland, really good at empathy and particularly the R, lots of, really good at stroking. And I think, again, Rhonda, you might have pointed him towards us in those early days.
I did. He emailed me because he'd been listening to the podcast, and then I passed him him your email address.
Yeah. And a few other people as well. And gradually people from various parts of the UK, London, Bristol, and then somebody else in Scotland and in Ireland came back. And so gradually we grew to about 25 or 30 of us today. And then even spilling over a little bit, like Ana Teresa from Portugal, because you've spoken to her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
She's with us now as well. And Dipti is joining in as well.
Dipti Joshi.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. and another of her colleagues as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Dipti's a member of the British Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapists, psychotherapists.
She is, and she's got good contacts there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak about it in a minute, but she helps us form better connections.
Cool. And so
I think I remember now why I felt my workshop was kind of a failure is because I was trying to, I figured, well, I helped get cognitive therapy on the map, but now something better has emerged. And so they'll be all excited to hear about what's newer and better. And I kind of had and certainly there were many people there were gracious and enthusiastic, and we went out to dinner. Maybe you were part of those dinners a couple of the evenings, and it was all positive. But my impression overall was that people didn't want to hear that there was a different approach or something like that, like they were being threatened, their territory was being threatened. So, and that came as, it probably shouldn't have been a surprise, but it came as a kind of a surprise to me.
And I'm not surprised by that either. I think we are sort of fairly set in our ways, and I imagine it is, I think, proving quite hard to persuade people that there are different ways. I think a few people from your workshop, David, were taken, and one person I did keep in contact with on the stage, you challenged her to do thought empathy, just straightforward, and acknowledge somebody's anger, and she didn't. And she remembers that very clearly, and she was really taken with it as well. But like a lot of us, we are sort of taken up in other areas, and the organizations we work for may not be flexible, and so it is hard to sort of break in when there's so much good stuff there already, and people get sort of cling on to their ways. But when something even better comes along, it might be hard.
And then what are you doing now? David has a Tuesday group that he and Jill lead to train therapists in the United States and California and he's broadening it to the United States. And I and Richard Lamb and Lee Harrington have the Wednesday group where we're hoping to primarily train team therapists internationally. And you have, I think a lot of people from Team UK are in the Wednesday group, but you have your own Tuesday group where people can get training and practice teaching as well. So tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks, Rhonda. I mean, thank you for the Wednesday group, because a lot of us do attend that, and it's great training. And a lot of us attend both UK training and your training. It's a great combo. So, and you're providing that for free, which is greatly appreciated. But yeah, we started off saying, well, what do we want? Now we've sort of identified each other. What do we want to do? And it'd be nice to practice a little bit together. So we started meeting on a weekly basis. And then there was a little bit of didactic to work out what we're going to be practicing on. So it became a little bit of a teaching thing. So we still meet every week for 1 hour. And that's Tuesday evenings, but also Tuesday morning, another group started to learn the TEA before they could catch up, a bit like with your Wednesday group, before they could catch up with the methods group. So there's 2 groups running currently on a weekly basis. And then we meet every month for a kind of business meeting as well.
Fun. And then we're not really that familiar in the United States with the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Psychotherapies, but you were telling me when I was there that organization has specialty groups. And when you're a specialty group within that organization, you have additional responsibilities and privileges. And you, I think with the help of Dipti and others, but primarily you have done the footwork in order to get a specialty group dedicated to team therapy. Can you tell us a little bit about that and like what that means?
Yeah, so the BABCP is the sort of overarching body which accredits practitioners in the UK. And it's difficult to get work with any organization. Well, you probably wouldn't get work with any organization or agency unless you're accredited with the BABCP. Yes, and we applied for special interest group status, and after a few months, we achieved it. And that's particularly good because, one, it's a kind of level of formal recognition that this is okay, this is good, and a really good platform to spread interest, because the word will now go out to like 15,000 members, and we'll get the opportunity to do workshops and present to them, and hopefully, there'll be an expansion in numbers and interest, and a bit like, I'm not going to compare it to the virus, but hopefully, it'll really catch on through that route.
Wow, that's exciting. So again, you were telling me that there's like 13,000 email addresses that you have that you could connect to or send information on about trainings that you might be putting on or information about Team CBT.
Well, not so much that I have them, but the BABCP has a membership. And if they will speak to their membership about anything, it will go out to about 15,000 people. So when we launch, word will go out and we'll have a launch event, a workshop. And then hopefully we'll also be able to present at the big conference next year in June.
Exciting.
Yeah, exciting. We want to tread carefully as well. We don't want to lose our, intimacy and connection that we're enjoying already with the bureaucracy and getting too big as well.
Uh-huh. So Peter, if somebody throughout the UK has been listening to these podcasts and reading Feeling Great or Feeling Good and wants to learn more about how to become a team therapist or practice, how would they reach you?
They can reach several of us, but they can reach me, certainly. If they go on to our website, which is Feeling Good, no, not feelinggood.com, feelinggood.uk.com.
Feelinggood.uk.com.
Yep. And on there, you can see the various practitioners, or some of us, we're not all on there, and our contact details.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, is there anything else that you'd like the listeners of this podcast to know about what it is that Team UK is doing?
Yeah. So, Rhonda, you will know that we've been meeting by Zoom. That was until recently, when we had that lovely meeting in Oxford, and you very kindly diverted your travels in Europe to join us. And that was the first time we'd met in person. So it was great. That was such a lovely occasion. And, you sat through our meeting and listened carefully to, what we were looking for. And we listened to you about your thoughts. And I think that made a great connection. It's great to meet Mike as well, by the way. Michael. Very charming, very, very witty. So it's good to meet him as well. You probably remember some of the things that we're talking about, like we want to think about maybe starting 10 days to self-esteem practice, 5 secrets practice. And we've got bigger ideas down the line that we want to get involved with spreading this further, and maybe into some organizations, maybe into the NHS, to make it official. I mean, we'd love to see that down the line, to do better teaching for ourselves, to connect well with the wider the global Team CBT network as well. Interestingly, and I'd like to ask David, if I may, Team CBT and coaching. We were speaking to some coaching psychologists, and they're beginning to sort of listen. Like we didn't realize that so few people really know how people are feeling. And if therapists are only getting it 10% right, what are we doing and what can we do? They're certainly interested in evaluation of session. We should be doing that. We definitely should be doing that. And how do we handle the answers? How do we overcome resistance to doing the evaluation of session? So questions coming up, and I'm thinking, this is great, but they can't do Team CBT because it's not CBT, but they can certainly adopt parts of it. And I just wonder, David, whether you've got some ideas on that and how they might do that.
Well, those are all great questions. Let's take them one at a time.
So Team CBT and coaching, they would like to adopt parts of it to enhance coaching, but obviously it's not going to be the team model in total.
Well, I'm not sure why they wouldn't want to, but I would have to have a clearer idea of what they mean by coaching, I guess. But I think that the Team CBT model doesn't work very well when you take just a part of it. I think it's it's like doing open heart surgery, and there's a certain systemic way of doing it that can get really good results. If you wanted to do just part of the heart surgery, like we just want to cut people's chests open, you wouldn't get very, very good outcomes. I believe that a coach could make very valuable, impact on patients, assuming we're talking about, the 4 targets of team, which would be depression, anxiety, relationship problems, or habits and addictions. So that's how I see my calling, is that's what team is designed for. So if they're working on those kinds of things, then I would want them to adopt the model as we've developed it. Everyone can innovate and do it in a way that's suitable to your own personality. But I can't see not using the testing. I can't see not practicing empathy and doing great empathy. It's inconceivable to do anything in any area of life without dealing with resistance and motivation. And then, so I can't see omitting that part and getting anywhere. That's been the error of most therapists, is thinking, I'm going to jump in, and I made this error myself for years and throw methods at people. And then, we've got over 100 methods, and they're based on all schools of therapy, and anything that has real merit can be included in the methods part of the session. So, I think the things all hang together. What parts of it are they wanting to use or exclude?
Well, people I've spoken to are on board with the testing, certainly the 5 secrets. And yeah, of course, they're going to be interested in motivation. Yes, of course. And the methods that they use might be slightly different. But they can use a lot of the methods that are compatible with coaching. So when you put it like that, it sounds as though it all hangs together really well. And that's exciting. Yeah. That's exciting.
Like if they're doing coaching, maybe they want to help someone with job interview skills. And, then you can actually adapt 5 secrets to that. And, I'd love to talk to them about what kind of methods, what kind of problems they're trying to solve with their patients. I think the one thing to be careful about, I'm not big on diagnosis, but I think sometimes it's useful to have diagnostic skill. And I think it's also really important to have some training, which doesn't take long, by the way, and how to assess the seriousness of somebody's suicidal impulses. They'll see that from the brief mood survey that they get the score at the start and end of every session. But how to do a good suicide interview to find out if someone really is at risk and perhaps needs some more intensive treatment than once a week outpatient therapy. and to deal with violence as well. But I personally, like in the Tuesday group, as you probably were aware of, being a wonderful member for some time, I don't care what someone's training is. I care what they can bring in terms of skill and empathy and commitment to learning. And, you know, we've had, I think Sonny Choi just grabbed a degree because he gave up his high-powered Silicon Valley technical career and probably a lucrative income because he has always wanted to help people, and he just grabbed a social work degree so he could have a road in. But he has blossomed into a brilliant therapist. He doesn't have, you know, PhDs in clinical psychology or MDs the way you and I have. But he is a brilliant and compassionate therapist. So he's a star. And then there are others who maybe have a lot of fancy degrees. We had one in Philadelphia. One of our students had 3 doctor's degrees, and he had an MD and 2 PhDs. We called him Doctor. Ron Wright was his name. He's really, really a nice guy, but degrees don't guarantee your effectiveness. And my perception of most therapists, no matter what their degrees are, is that they're not very effective.
Because you know what the Dalai Lama said about that, David?
No, what did the Dalai Lama say?
I mean, I actually have this quote on my desk that having a smart brain isn't enough. We also need a warm heart.
Yeah.
And not that coaches can't have a warm heart, but I'm also confused about what exactly a coach does that's different than what a therapist or of any degree does. But one thing I think that's really cool about somebody in Team UK has done with team therapy is Tom Gedman, who's another general practitioner, and he has, you know, there's a Team UK WhatsApp group, and he was writing about how he was teaching the 5 secrets to other GP practitioners in a different organization that he's in, and he has the, you know, sort of the hope that would become part of the standardized training for GPs in the UK, which would be super cool.
Yeah,
that's neat. That's neat. Another thing, and you know, I'm not sure what we're supposed to be talking about in this podcast. It's just fun shooting the breeze with you. But this isn't final, but we're starting by probably a week from now. I'll have the results of the app I've been working on, the largest beta test with about 150 people. And it looks really promising that, you know, we're getting large one-day reductions in depression and anxiety and hopelessness and anger that really exceed any outcome studies that have ever been published with antidepressants or any form of psychotherapy, including cognitive therapy. And one thing that we're thinking about, we're continuing to refine it and make it even more potent, but it's already outperforms human therapists, and quickly. And we've been thinking about the model of combining the app with human therapists, like, say, your group in England, and then getting some outcome data on that to see if there's a synergy there, and see, because the app can do things that human therapists will never be able to do. The human therapists can't compete with our app in what the app can do, but at the same time, as you say, there's that heart, the warmth, the compassion, the relationship that human therapists can do that perhaps an app can't do. So we're wondering if 1 + 1 would be 3. So maybe your group or some of the members of your group might have an interest in something like that, having their patients use the app as, you know, for free as part of the beta testing, and see if you think that enhances your efforts.
Great. Yeah, certainly we've taken that message on board. And I'm just thinking, one of our number, his name is Ian Norman. He's an emeritus professor of mental health at King's College. And we were talking, you know, he's interested in research, and how hard it is to get outcome data. And he may be really interested in finding ways to work with that in the UK as well.
Yeah, he might want to work with us on helping us set up some really well-designed outcome studies, because we want to really validate that. I know when you do outcome studies involving humans, you're talking things that cost, if they're well done, millions of dollars. We asked a consultant recently who was getting drugs approved by the FDA, antidepressants and stuff. And he said he thought we could put together a modest but pretty nice outcome study for roughly $135 million. I don't think we're in that league. We haven't even raised $100 yet. But I think we can do, just excellent, less costly studies, probably without any money at all. That I've always been very focused on research, and I've published a lot of research studies, even though I've been a practitioner primarily. But now we can get a lot of data really quickly, and find efficacy of what we're doing. And then the neat thing is I can see what parts of the app are the most effective and what parts are not effective, which is always a huge surprise. And then change the ones that aren't effective, something human therapists often won't do. They want to keep doing the same thing. The computer doesn't complain if I say, okay, this part of you isn't working, let's change it. But I'm very excited about the potential of what we're doing for research. But I think the integration with a receptive audience of therapists who would be open to that this kind of collaboration could really make some waves in terms of getting far more rapid and extensive recovery for people with depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds exciting. And what's moving to me is you're still doing getting the data, looking at the data, finding out what's effective. Often in very simple terms, putting that forward, but that's what you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
Solid, consistent, based on data, just all such, that constancy, that reliable continuity is what's really impressed me and makes all this feel, really solid for me. I'm quite cynical, and when I was sort of checking through the bits of Team, I was looking for the chinks. It's just watertight.
Did I say that again, the last sentence?
It's just watertight.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, I appreciate that. Do you ever get shocked when you look at your data with patients? The feedback at the end of the session, or the change in mood from start to end of session? Or
yes. Very, yeah, absolutely. Like this week, I've done a mechanical team, just gone through it, and it just felt like I'm not doing anything here. I'm just going through the steps, and it's just, bang, she's cured. I didn't expect that. It's just worked.
That was so cool.
And then somebody else, I thought you being very skillful and understanding and everything. And, I got slammed on the evaluation of session. So absolutely, often surprised both ways.
Does it ever hurt your feelings when you get slammed, or maybe you're not that narcissistic? But personally, I find it painful sometimes.
I've learned enough to know that even though it's painful and sometimes a bit frustrating, that I can turn it around quite quickly.
Yeah.
To know that it's of real value. So it does hurt a bit. It doesn't hurt for long, because, I can then put it into the context that obviously, I've learned from listening to you, the podcasts and other people.
Mm-hmm. Well, Peter,
anything else you want to go over, Rhonda?
Yeah, no, this is just going to say it was such a pleasure to have you, and, to spread the word about what Team UK's existence and how people can be a part of it and get the learning from you guys and the practice with you, and, expand it even further.
Thank you. It's, like I said, such a great opportunity. I can't believe that I've just spent nearly an hour in this company. It's just a high point of my life. So thank you so much.
Well, it's a high point for me too, and I look forward to joining your group, your Tuesday group. Maybe we can do another Q&A session or something with them. To me, an hour isn't much time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you would be definitely, absolutely welcomed with open arms to our Tuesday, one of our Tuesday sessions. That would be absolutely fantastic if you would join us. So I will take up on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Well, Peter, wishing you a warm holiday season and much continued success in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. So kind and sweet of you to invite us and to join us in Oxford. And David, thank you so much for just constancy, just always steady. And, I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Peter. I think there must be a British spirit that somehow is just filled with humility and brilliance and compassion and kindness. And Sterling Moorey had it, and you have it, and it's so refreshing and so humbling to interact with you. My admiration for you is just fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. And I will speak to Sterling, so hopefully we can look forward to that.
Yeah. And can Peter tell Sterling that we ask him if he'd want to be on our podcast?
Oh yeah, we'll get his email address from Peter.
Yeah,
and that'll be an exciting podcast. And Peter, give our love to your beautiful wife, Caroline.
Oh, thank you. Very, very kind. I will. Thank you. It's very thoughtful of you to include that, Rhonda.
Of course. Okay, take care, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.